Toastmasters. Our Find Your Funny Toastmasters educational headliner today is Erin Beverly, the 2019 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking, which sounds impressive. He says until you learn that he doesn't think he's funny. In fact, a friend once told him, "Erin, humor just isn't your thing." And she was probably right. Aaron describes his comedic beginnings as a series of polite pity laughs, awkward silences, and a lot of failure. But through trial and error, he's learned ways to find his own version of funny. But whether you laugh with him or at him is another story. Please help me welcome Aaron Beverly with his speech, Fail into the Funny.
Thank you very much, everyone. It is true. I do not think that I am all that funny. But through time, I have learned to use humor as a tool. Now, I've been debating exactly how I was going to conduct this educational session. And I thought that, okay, I would regale you with all of the theories that I've learned and how I treat humor as a science. But I started to think to myself, that's not really funny. How can I teach something funny and not be funny? So I decided I'm not going to try to be funny. I'm not going to regale you with all of the science and the theories. What I will tell you is how I got started speaking, how I got started trying to be funny, where that ended up, and where it is today. And it all stems around my 5-step approach to humor. Try, fail, learn, change, try again. And we start with try. I tried to be funny for a long time. I got to my Toastmasters club. I saw people who were able to be humorous. I saw people who were able to tell jokes, and I thought, I want to be funny like them. And I would try, and it would not go so well. Like I said, I had a friend who came to me after a meeting, and the little pipsqueak told me, Aaron, humor just is not your thing. And I thought to myself, well, with friends like you, who needs a hater? But one thing that I knew was that you don't join Toastmasters to be good at what you're already good at. I was good with the inspiration. I was good with just giving a prepared speech, but I wanted to be funnier. I wanted to use humor in my speeches. So I kept trying. And when you try, and be honest, when you try and don't quite know what you're doing, you're going to fail. And I failed a lot. I can remember countless times when I would get on stage and I would give this joke that I thought was the absolute funniest joke in the world and get crickets. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of evidence that I've since deleted so that I don't show you any of those embarrassing moments. And thankfully, that was before YouTube became a big thing. So there isn't a lot of proof on YouTube of me being so horrible on stage. I like to keep that in the past. That's where it belongs. But when I failed and failed and failed again, one thing that became apparent to me was the value of our Toastmasters community. Toastmasters is one of the best places to fail. I love how we can just have a safe environment for us to try different things. And no matter how much you suck, at the end of your talk, somebody's going to clap for you. I always appreciated that because, ladies and gentlemen, there were many times where I absolutely sucked. And I would get those pity laughs, those laughs where people are laughing more so because they feel awkward because of you rather than the thing that you actually said was funny. Which leads me to what comes after the fail, and that's learning. You can try and fail all you want. but learning, that's where you spend your most time. Interestingly enough, I started learning how to be more funny from a person who I honestly don't find all that funny. This is going to be controversial, but I started learning about what comedians do and how they prepare their material from the documentary Comedian by Jerry Seinfeld, who I do not find funny at all. I I will be willing to bet anyone that I could sit through an entire Jerry Seinfeld special and I will not laugh once. I may smile, but that's about it. Jerry Seinfeld, he's just not my type of comedian, but his process I fell in love with. I saw how comedians would go to club after club after club after club just to practice one line, one joke, different ways. And it got me to think, wow, this is exactly how we as speech competitors, being in the contest, prepare our speeches and how we can refine our speeches and test our speeches. So I started to take a more scientific approach to my humor, where there were some things that I said that were funny to people. I started to write that down. I started to see if I could get people to react the same way if I tried those things again. And they would laugh again. I found that interesting. So I kept playing around with it. But that wasn't the only place where I learned. I also learned from those failures that I had. For instance, I started recording myself on stage. I started recording myself giving my speeches, and there were certain things that I would say. People would find it funny. I didn't expect that to be funny, but I watched the video. I saw what I was doing with my facial expressions. Okay, so the facial expression plus the content which I'm talking about, that combination seems to be making people laugh. So humor can happen through visuals as well as auditory. Okay, lesson learned. I also started to learn from other comedians who I actually thought were funny. Now, my inspirations for comedy were some of the old school comedians. My absolute favorite, Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was my favorite comedian for a very long time until fairly recently. In fact, there are some things in his stand-up routine that I actually took from myself. And no, I did not steal his actual content. I just stole one of the things that he did. For instance, in 2016, you may recall a mention of a bus lady of doom. Now, when this bus lady of doom, this very nasty person, received just a hint of kindness, she did something that I never thought I would see from her. And that super grinny smile came from Eddie Murphy. I saw his routine. I saw him just do this wide, seemingly demonic smile, and people howled. I personally didn't understand it. That wasn't one of the things that made me laugh. But when I did it on stage, people laughed. I said, okay, I will keep doing it. Another person that I learned from, Robin Williams. And Robin Williams was an interesting one because I knew Robin Williams from being the voice actor of some of my favorite childhood movies. I remember he was Batty in Ferngully. He was the genie in Aladdin. And I heard in the past he was Mork from Mork and Mindy. So, let me watch this Robin Williams special and see this family-friendly content. I don't think I've ever heard so many F-bombs used in the span of 1 minute than when I watched Robin Williams perform his special. Family-friendly on stage in the comedy realm, Robin Williams is not. But hilarious, he absolutely is. And what I saw from him was just his ability to be in the moment or seemingly in the moment. Because what I heard was that Robin Williams would actually practice his improv so that he knew exactly what he was going to do in whatever situation. And that taught me, okay, maybe I can start preparing for different situations. If the audience reacts one way, I'll use this. If the audience reacts another way, I'll use that. So these were all of the different ways in which I learned. But just to give you a little bit of the lessons that I learned through theory, one thing that I learned that I started to adopt in my everyday practices were one of the theories of humor. Now, there are multiple theories of humor that I studied. There were four in all. The first one is the incongruity theory, which you're expecting one thing, you give the audience another, and that discrepancy or that gap, that's what creates the laugh. The superiority theory, that's when it's kind of one of the more controversial theories where we talk down about someone or something, but since we're superior, since we're above the situation, it's okay for us to laugh about it. Then there's the relief theory. You build up this tension, and then the audience is more relieved when you find out that, okay, it's funny because nothing bad happened. Okay, we're cool, we're all good. And then the fourth one was the one that I liked the most, and that was the benign violation theory. The benign violation theory is that you have something that could be deemed controversial, but it's either happened so long in the past that it's not as taboo to talk about in a comedic sense, or the audience is so far removed from the situation that they don't mind having humor about it. You may tentatively laugh, but you'll still laugh. Now, these were some of the things that I learned. And the reason why, again, I'm spending so much time on the learn is because this is where I started to learn how to become funnier by emulating the people who I saw on stage, by reading books, by reading, or sorry, by looking at different videos from people who specialized in comedy. Which now leads me to change. There are multiple things that I had to change. I had to change how I approached my process. I had to change the way that I approached people. At the end of the day, I learned that the golden rule wasn't just a golden rule for speaking, but a golden rule for comedy as well. And that golden rule is KYA, know your audience. I had to learn the different audiences that I was speaking to because we have to get over ourselves sometimes and realize that everyone will not find us funny. Everyone will not find every piece of humor humorous in certain situations. One lesson that I learned through competing in Toastmasters contests, Toastmasters don't really like the use of violence, even if that violence is justified and or humorous. For instance, when I was a kid, I would get bullied by this bully named Michael. And one day, Michael had bullied me enough. And I remember he ran down the street, and I was never an athletic person, but I saw a rock and I saw Michael. And I hurled that rock at Michael, and with pinpoint precision that I've never been able to replicate again, hit him square on the head. Now, I thought that that was something funny, a bully getting his comeuppance. But when I gave that speech in front of Toastmasters, they thought, oh my goodness, how could you? Oh, one person came up to me and said, I thought that you should have been in juvie hall. Like, what would your mother think? And I thought to myself, but who you think told me to throw the rock? But that was something that I didn't think was going to be suitable to say. So I just learned how to adapt to my audience. But moreover, I learned to change based off of what the audience told me was good and what they told me wasn't. Ed Tate, the 2000 world champion of public speaking, taught me very early the audience decides. So when the audience laughed, I knew I had something good. When the audience didn't laugh, I would try it again. But at some point, if they were not laughing anymore, I had to let the content go. Which leads me to try again. This isn't something where I've gotten it down to a science where I know exactly how an audience is going to react every single time I speak. What I continue to do is try. There are certain things that I find funny that I'll try to sneak into my everyday conversations. Sometimes people will think what I say is funny, sometimes they won't. So I'll try to weave it into other conversations. Sometimes they'll think it's funny, sometimes they won't. But I keep trying again. Humor is not for the faint of heart. It's not for those who don't want to be rejected. It's not for those who are afraid of failure. And I should know because I actually am afraid of rejection and failure. But yet, I find myself being able to try to evoke more humor in my everyday talks. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it isn't. But I always stick to that 5-step system. Try, fail, learn, change. And then, of course, try again. And hopefully, you'll keep trying again as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so very much for that insight. Do any of our members have questions for Aaron? Briefly?
I'll throw one out. Tom Hobbs. Aaron, you've played on the international stage more than once.
That is
What's an
true.
area of humor that you saw goes, that works internationally? What's one style of humor that works internationally that you've witnessed?
One thing that I found works well internationally is self-deprecating humor. Because when you're talking about someone, there's probably going to be someone in that audience who's going to be offended. And when I say someone in that audience, I mean a sizable population of people who will find certain things offensive. But self-deprecating humor, when you're making yourself look like the fool, that, for lack of a better term, it's more of the safe humor.
Very true. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for being here with us today. We very much appreciate your insights. Delightful to have you among us. We
Thank
are
you.
now going to move on to our first